You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. The Winnipeg Centre of the Royal Canadian College of Organists presents New York-based concert organist Gail Archer in a solo recital. Exploring repertoire from the 17th through 21st centuries, Archer is an acclaimed player, as well as a choral conductor and educator at Columbia University, who has recorded several CDs, given countless recitals and tours. Performing Saturday and Sunday at Young United Church, I'm joined by Lottie Ensbron to learn more. Good morning, Lottie.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Classic 107 studio. My first in-person conversation in years. It's a pleasure to see you here in real life.
That's awesome. What better instrument to feature first?
Yes, than the king of the instruments. So you, of course, are well known here in the Manitoba music community, one of the city's finest organists and music director at Young United Church. You also happen to be my History 4 teacher back at the U of M days a few years back. How did you come to know Gail Archer?
I've met Gail only once. About 20 years ago, the McGill University had summer organ academies every 2 summers, and I went, and Gail was there, and we hit it off. She was also a music history instructor and also a female organist, which was still somewhat rare in those days, and so we struck up a 2-week friendship.
A 2-week friendship that now comes full circle 20 years later. What made you go about reconnecting with Gail?
So when Russia invaded Ukraine, as I think everybody did, I thought, what can I do? The very least I can do is play some Ukrainian music in the Sunday morning services. And I had nothing. So I searched the internet, found Gail's CD that has only Ukrainian music on it, contacted her and said, is any of this music readily available? She said, yes, there's one. And so I printed it off, learned it, played it in church, and then she emailed me back and said, hey, if you ever want to do a fundraiser, pay my fare and I'll come up. I won't charge you a fee. And so countless meetings later, a little bit of fundraising, and here we are, waiting for her to arrive on Saturday morning.
Oh, very exciting indeed. You mentioned you finding that music, looking for Ukrainian composers, and then reconnecting with Gail Archer. In addition to being a great player, she's a conductor and an educator, but also the founder and editor of Muse Forum, which is an online network for women organists celebrating their accomplishments and wide-ranging interests. She sounds like a really inspiring individual.
Absolutely, yeah. She's what I remember, and now I've watched a number of YouTube videos of her recitals. She's very, very passionate about what she does. She's very dedicated to a lot of things, and doing a CD of just Ukrainian music in Ukraine. Making friends with some of the composers. She's playing everything that's on the CD at the recital. Plus, I'm going to call it the pivotal piece, is one of Bach's great fantasias. I requested that. I said, let's have one composer that people recognize, and she agreed. So she'll be playing Bach. She's a master of playing Bach, of Zweelinck, the early Baroque music, and yet is not afraid to. She's done a recital series of just Messiaen. If you're an organist, you know that that's not for the faint of heart.
She was the first female organist to do the full Messiaen, wasn't she?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just a real trailblazer that way. How would you characterize her playing?
It's. I love it because it's clean.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of, I would say, showiness. She really does just let the music speak, but it's very, very clean. You can hear the important lines, which is sometimes really easy on the organ, sometimes not that easy because it doesn't breathe unless you let it breathe.
Yeah, certainly a good point. You mentioned the disc, which you've brought with you, Chernivtsi. It's here in the studio. We're going to hear a little snippet from that CD just to end this conversation in a few minutes' time. Chernivtsi, a city I've actually visited. It's a very beautiful city. It's a cultural center. It's known as Little Vienna. And it sort of, architecturally speaking, looks like the Austrian capital. She recorded a CD there. She's toured Ukraine. Proceeds of this concert are going to be going towards the humanitarian aid effort. Where are proceeds going towards?
So we've decided, this was tough too. where should the money go? So we chose, with the help of one of our board members who also has done in his career, worked in Ukraine a fair bit. It's the Ukrainian Humanitarian Aid Appeal, which is jointly sponsored by the Canadian Ukrainian Congress and the Canada-Ukraine Foundation. And personally, what appealed to me about this choice is they've been around for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And their mandate appears to be immediate help. So it's immediate medical aid, immediate assistance to refugees who are now displaced. And the other thing that I really, really found interesting was that one of their mandates for the next couple of years is they're going to be training hundreds of social workers to work with traumatized children. Mm. And the last number I read was there are almost 10,000 displaced children. I mean, we have, I can't even imagine that. I think, my children had little traumas, but this and that many children, and to know that they're already looking ahead saying, look, these kids, obviously everybody's going to need mental health attention, but certainly the children.
Yeah, doing such important work and work that will immediately make a difference, but also looking longer term. You mentioned the Ukrainian composers that are on this disc, names that are likely not familiar to audiences. I didn't really recognize any myself. If they haven't heard these composers, who kind of range from, I think, the 19th through present day in terms of the music that's on the CD and the music that will be performed this weekend, how would you characterize the music?
Some of it's edgy. There's some spiky stuff. There's some very introspective music. Mm. The Ostrova, if people have heard the ad, the theme for the Chaconne by Svetlana Ostrova, she's the only female composer. One of the living composers. Is a couple, I think 3 living composers represented, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. That's probably the most melodic, if one needs to speak about easy listening. But what I really love about this is, obviously these pieces were composed long before the invasion. But I think one of the mandates we as musicians have is not only to please the ear, but to challenge it. Mm-hmm. And I think especially now when we're seeing all of these atrocities, it's amazing to kind of sit there and go, oh, okay, that struck me a little bit strange. And the other thing that I think is really cool when I'm listening to music I've never heard before, you appreciate it more and more the more you hear it. So what people could do is come on Saturday and then come back on Sunday.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, especially when you mention, there's perhaps more spiky or edgier stuff where the first time it perhaps maybe is a little bit jarring, but then as you listen to it more, it becomes more familiar. You have more to grab onto. Yeah. And a lot of this music, again, looking at the CD, comes from the 20th century, which was a pretty diverse time, musically speaking, to put it very, very mildly. Now, this concert is going to be happening at Young United Church. Again, 2 chances to see Gail Archer perform if you want to come to one or the other, or both, as you just mentioned. But to me, the organ is one of those instruments, and I guess this argument could be made for any instrument, but the organ especially is one of those instruments that is best experienced live, in that, yes, you can hear it and you can see it, but with the organ especially, you can feel it. It is all-encompassing. So for you as someone who knows that organ at Young United so well, how would you characterize its sound for those in the audience that haven't been there in the congregation?
It's without any bias, of course. It's my favorite organ in the city. It's small. It's not a huge instrument. It only has 2 keyboards, plus the pedal board, of course. But one of the things that I love about it is that every single stop on that organ can function on its own. Mm. You don't need a big soup of 5-6 stops just to make some sort of sound that you want. A single flute will do it. So it's clean. It's a Baroque instrument. It's modeled after the Baroque. Of course, it's got bells and whistles of the 20th century, which all of us appreciate because it makes it easier to play. But I think that the sounds are just pure and beautiful. Gail will use every bit of the instrument, which means sometimes she might use everything at the same time. Sometimes she will use single stops, as you know, and with the two keyboards, you can have a solo sound against a more generic accompaniment sound. Of course, the other thing people love about seeing the organ played is that you can watch all of the technique going on.
It is incredible. It is like juggling while also, I don't know, preparing a supper. It's very, very impressive.
It's crazy, and it's amazing. And sight lines are good at Young, so you'll see her feet because that's the most important thing, of course. But just to watch what needs to happen. Now these stops need to change. Now you need to change keyboards. It's lovely. It's a small space. The organ was built for that space, so it doesn't overwhelm.
Yeah, it's going to be a feast for the eyes and the ears that
Absolutely.
way. Gail Archer, literally and figuratively pulling out all the stops.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever used that expression so appropriately. Lottie, it has been wonderful having you back in the studio, and we have some tickets to give away to this concert. Listeners can call and take their choice of Saturday or Sunday. Saturday's concert begins at 7:30 p.m. Sunday, a matinee at 3. Young United Church at 222 Furby at Broadway. The New York-based concert organist Gail Archer coming to town in an organ recital in support of humanitarian aid for Ukraine. The number to call, 204-336-1071, as we hear a little bit of Gail Archer's playing.